the difference between a man with a plan and a man with a dream. There are two kinds of men who talk about the future. The first kind talks about it with a particular light in his eyes, a warmth that fills the room, a contagious enthusiasm that makes everyone around him lean in and nod and feel, briefly, that something extraordinary is about to happen. He has ideas. He has vision. He can describe where he is going with a clarity and passion that sounds, in the moment, like certainty. The second kind of man talks about the future the same way, same light, same warmth, same enthusiasm, same room leaning in. The difference between them is not visible in the conversation. It is not visible in the plan documents they may or may not have, saved on their laptops or the notebooks they carry. The difference reveals itself only in time, in the slow, unglamorous passage of months and years that separate the men who build something real from the men who are still describing, with equal passion, the same vision they were describing 5 years ago. One of these men has a plan, the other has a dream. And if you are being honest with yourself right now, you already know which one you have been. Dreams are not the enemy. This is the first thing to understand, because the moment you hear that a dream is not enough, something defensive rises in you, a protective instinct toward the vision you have been carrying, sometimes for years, sometimes with genuine sacrifice. The dream is not the problem. The dream is the raw material. It is the unrefined version of something that could, with the right structure applied to it, become real. What makes it dangerous is not its existence, but its comfort. A dream is the one place where you are always winning in the space of the dream. The business is thriving. The book is written. The body is built. The relationship is deep and sustaining. The version of yourself you most want to be is already walking around in the world being recognized for exactly what you always knew you were worth. The dream costs nothing to maintain, and it delivers a steady, low-grade satisfaction that is just sufficient to prevent the discomfort required to produce anything real. It is a very comfortable place to live, and a very effective way to waste a life. The man with a plan does not necessarily have more talent. He is not always more intelligent, more disciplined by nature, or more gifted with the raw material of his particular ambition. What he has, and what the dreamer chronically lacks, is a specific relationship with reality. He has learned, through experience or through the particular kind of honesty that only arrives after real failure, to treat the gap between where he is and where he wants to be not as a source of inspiration but as a problem to be solved. And problems, unlike dreams, require specificity. They require dates and decisions and the willingness to be measured against something concrete enough to fail at. The dreamer avoids this, not consciously, not maliciously, but systematically. In the 100 small ways a man finds to stay in motion without moving forward. The research that never ends, the preparation that never feels complete, the networking that substitutes for building, the planning that substitutes for starting, all of it feels like progress. None of it is. What this chapter will give you is a clear, unsparing understanding of the psychological difference between a man with a plan and a man with a dream, how the dreamer's mind operates, where the pattern comes from, and the specific shifts in thinking and behavior that convert vision into architecture. This is not about motivation. Motivation is the dream's favorite currency, and it spends about as well as a foreign bill in a country that does not recognize it. This is about structure, accountability, and the particular kind of courage it takes to put a number and a date next to something you care about deeply, enough to be devastated if you fail at it. The psychological mechanism that keeps a man locked in the dream rather than the plan is not laziness. Laziness is the explanation dreamers use when they are being hard on themselves, and it is almost always wrong, which is part of why it never produces change. You can identify a lazy man easily, because he does not talk about the future with passion. He is not researching, not networking, not filling notebooks with ideas, not consuming content related to his vision at 11 o'clock at night when he should be sleeping. The dreamer does all of those things. The dreamer is often one of the hardest working men in the room, measured by hours spent in proximity to his ambition. What he is not doing, and what laziness fails to explain, is converting that energy into committed, measurable, irreversible action. The reason he is not Doing that is not a deficit of motivational character. It is a deficit of tolerance for a very specific kind of discomfort. The discomfort of being officially, publicly, undeniably in the process of attempting something and therefore officially, publicly, undeniably at risk of failing at it. Think about what happens the moment a dream becomes a plan. The moment you write down, not I want to build a business, but I will generate my first $10,000 in revenue by the end of the next 6 months. Through these specific actions, beginning on this specific date, something changes in your body when you write that down. There is a tightening, a subtle but real contraction in the chest, because you've just done something the dream never required you to do. You have made yourself accountable to reality. The dream was yours alone, existing in a private space where no external standard could touch it. The plan belongs to time, and time is ruthless. 6 months from now, you will either have done it or you will not, and there will be no way to explain the gap between your vision and your result that does not implicate you directly. That exposure is what the dreamer's psychology is, organized at a very deep level to avoid, not because he is cowardly in the conventional sense, but because somewhere in his history, probably earlier than he remembers clearly, he learned that wanting something visibly and failing to get it was more painful than never having tried in a way that anyone, including himself, could see. The common misconception men hold about this pattern is that it is a problem of planning, that the dreamer simply needs to learn better organizational systems, more effective goal setting, frameworks, more sophisticated productivity tools. The self-improvement industry has made a substantial fortune selling this misconception, and so the dreamer buys the planner, downloads the app, watches the course on systems and habits, takes careful notes, feels the familiar surge of enthusiasm that attends any new beginning, and then, within weeks, finds himself back in exactly the same relationship with his ambition that he has always had, passionate, busy, and stationary. The system was not the problem. The system was another version of the dream, another place to feel productive without being exposed to the risk of genuine commitment. What actually needs to change is not the organizational architecture. It is the internal relationship with failure, with visibility, and with the terrifying but essential experience of putting something you care about into the world in a form concrete enough to be judged. The reframe that makes this shift possible is one of the most counterintuitive in this entire book. So stay with it. Failure, real failure, the kind that arrives when you committed to something specific and did not achieve it, is not the opposite of progress. It is the primary mechanism of progress. A man who attempts something concrete and falls short now has information that the dreamer never accumulates. He knows exactly where the gap is, exactly what broke down, exactly which assumption was wrong, exactly which skill needs to be developed or which resource needs to be acquired. That information is worth more than any amount of inspired preparation, because it is real. It was produced by contact with reality rather than by imagination about reality. The dreamer, by staying in the protected space of the vision, never gets this information. He remains perpetually inspired and perpetually at the beginning, because the beginning is the only place where the dream and the plan feel the same. You need to be willing to move past the beginning into the middle, which is ugly and slow and full of evidence that you underestimated how hard this was going to be. The middle is where real men are made. The dream has no middle. It goes from vision to arrival and quietly omits everything in between. Consider the man who has been telling the people closest to him for 3 years that he is going to write a book. He has the idea. He has done research. He has a folder on his desktop containing notes, outlines, fragments of chapters, articles he saved for reference. He talks about the book with real conviction, and the conviction is not false. He genuinely intends to write it. What he does not have is a word count for today, a chapter deadline for next month, a completion target for the end of the year, and a person in his life who knows those numbers and will ask him about them without those 4 things. The book is a dream. The folder is not a plan. The research is not a plan. The intention is not a plan. A plan is a structure of commitments fine-grained enough that any given day either satisfies them or it does not, and honest enough that the man living inside it cannot convince himself he is making progress when he is standing still. Most men never build that structure around the things they care most about, because building it means accepting that this is really happening, that they are really trying, and that the result will be a real measure of something real about them. That acceptance is what separates the man who eventually has something to show from, the man who eventually stops talking about it. The reflection this demands is direct, and it will be uncomfortable in proportion to how long you've been living in the dream. Take the ambition you talk about most, the one that lights you up in conversation, the one you return to when you imagine the future you want. Now ask yourself 3 questions and answer them without softening. What is the specific, measurable result that would tell you, and anyone else, that you have achieved it? What is the date by which you are committed to reaching that result? And who in your life knows both of those things and has your permission to hold you to them? If you cannot answer all 3 questions with precision, you do not have a plan. You have a very detailed, very passionate, very well-researched dream. And the dream, however beautiful, is not going to build what you came here to build. The shift from dreamer to builder does not happen in a moment of inspiration. This is the final irony, and the one worth sitting with the longest, because the dream is powered by inspiration, sustained by it, dependent on it in the way an addict is, dependent on a substance that feels like vitality and produces stasis. You have waited, probably without realizing you were waiting, for the feeling of readiness, for the moment when the conditions align, when the timing is right, when you have enough saved, or enough learned, or enough confidence accumulated to justify the risk of beginning in earnest. That moment has a name in the dreamer's psychology. It is called later. It is the most visited destination in the geography of unlived ambition, and no man has ever actually arrived there, because later is not a place. It is a postponement dressed in the language of strategy. The builder does not wait for readiness. He understands, through hard experience or through the rare gift of genuine self, honesty, that readiness is not a precondition for action. It is a consequence of it. You do not feel ready and then begin. You begin and then, gradually, through the accumulation of real attempts and real adjustments and real failures survived, you become the kind of man who is capable of what you are attempting. The capability is built in the attempt, not before it. Every man who has ever constructed something real in his life, a business, a body of work, a relationship of genuine depth, physical capability that required years of consistent effort, will tell you the same thing when he is being honest. He was not ready when he started. He started anyway, and the starting sustained past the point where most men quit because the dream turned out to be harder and slower and more humbling than they imagined, is the entire difference between the life he has and the life he would have had. What this means practically is that the plan you build today does not need to be perfect. Perfection is the dream's final defense mechanism, its last argument for why now is not quite the right moment to commit. The plan needs to be specific, enough to be failed at, and that is the only standard it needs to meet, a specific goal with a real date attached to it, shared with a real person who will ask you about it, is infinitely more powerful than the most beautifully constructed vision board or the most meticulously researched preparation that never makes contact with an actual deadline. You are not building a monument to your ambition. You are building a pressure system, a structure that makes inaction more uncomfortable than action, that makes the soft drift back into the dream feel like what it actually is, a choice made consciously to stay small. There is a man you know, perhaps not personally but by type, who did the thing you are describing as your future. He built the business, or wrote the book, or achieved the physical standard, or created the financial independence that you talk about when someone asks you where you are headed. And if you were honest with yourself about the difference between you and him, it would not be talent. It would not be luck in any fundamental sense. It would not be that he had access to resources or opportunities that were categorically unavailable to you. The difference would be that at some specific point, on some ordinary day that felt like no particular turning point at the time, he stopped treating his ambition as something that deserved to be protected from the risk of failure, and started treating it as something that deserved to be tested by reality. He made the commitment that exposed him, and the exposure, rather than destroying the dream, gave it weight and structure and the only quality that transforms vision into legacy, the quality of being real. You are capable of the thing you keep describing. This is not encouragement in the hollow, generic sense. It is an observation about the nature of sustained, structured effort applied honestly to a clearly defined outcome over a sufficient period of time. The question is not whether you have what it takes in some abstract, innate sense. The question is whether you are willing to find out, concretely, with your name attached to a specific result and a specific date, in a way that leaves no room for the comfortable ambiguity the dream depends on. Most men are not willing, not because they are failures by nature, but because the dream is genuinely comfortable and the plan is genuinely hard, and the distance between them is crossed only by a decision that feels, in the moment you make it, less like courage and more like a quiet, private reckoning with what you actually intend to do with the time you have. The dream asks nothing of you today. The plan asks everything, and it asks it now, in the specific form of a decision about what you are actually going to do before this day is over. Not tomorrow, when the inspiration returns. Not next week, when the conditions improve. Today, with the clarity you have right now, which is already more than enough to begin. A man with a dream is always almost ready. A man with a plan is already late, and he knows it, and he is moving anyway.